Guys, welcome to another Red Gaming Tech video. Now, this is going to be once again talking about Mass Effect 3. Now, finally, we've got some news on what's going to be happening with the DLC, in other words, the changing of the ending. Apparently, Bioware have said that there's going to be extended cut DLC, which is going to be free unless you download it after April 2014. So you've got a while. It's going to be released this summer, and it's going to extend the game's ending. Which is going to provide extra detail and insight to the fans of what happens to all the characters. Now, they've already said that the idea is to keep the artistic vision that they had for the game, which as it was launched. So in other words, they're not going to hack the story to pieces. It's going to be pretty much the same thing as far as we don't understand, but it's just going to be more fleshed out so that people don't kind of be left with scratching their head. Now, that sounds great in theory, although it's not the actual changing of the ending which bothers me as a principle. What does slightly bother me is that it sends out a message to other developers that they need to be really careful what they do, and they need to make sure that their endings are not somewhat controversial, and everything's going to be happy and dandy. In other words, that they're not going to upset anyone, because then the studio might have to cough up more money in the long run, and then naturally fans will complain, and so they'll have to cough up more money to change the ending. Now, there have been a few examples about this in other industries. For example, in Deep Blue Sea, I don't remember the characters' names, it's a long time since I've watched the film, but I know for a fact that one of the characters, the female doctor, was actually supposed to have lived in the original version. However, she was actually then decided to be killed off because the test panel, when they were actually showing the films, they found out she was not that popular of a character, even though she did become a heroine at the end, and they decided, they want to kill her off. So they reshot some of the film for this reason. So Hollywood now is becoming more and more adapted, releasing multiple endings of the film, and when you actually buy the movie, sometimes you get alternative cuts. Of course, only one of those is an actual true cut. So anyway, enough of my rambling. Amata and I were kind of considering what the pros and cons of this are and how we feel about it. Anyway, I've kind of gone into it, so I'll let her speak for a little bit.
Yeah, well, as you said, pros and cons, so I guess I'll start off with what I like about it. And what I like about it is this, I guess it shows people that, developers will actually listen to you. It's always nice to feel like, developers actually give a crap about what their fans have to say. And although them changing it might have some negative connotations, it does send a positive message that, hey, if you send your message in the right way rather than shouting at them angrily over a forum or whatever, developers might actually listen to you. So that's definitely a good thing for them, and I like the fact that they're giving the DLC away for free as well. That's always a plus.
I mean, I'd agree with that. To be honest, the fact it's free is kind of a standard. I think they'd actually have a napalm dropped on their headquarters otherwise, because I think people... I mean, they could have actually had a troll face when they put the thing up and be like, we'll change the ending. It's going to cost you $14.95, however. I mean, people would actually be performing running drop kicks on them. However, the fact that they are actually going through, the effort of getting all the actors in once again, which I'm assuming that these guys are going to... I don't think it'll be part of their contract, as in, if you want extra, then, that'll be part of our old contract. Therefore, EA, you won't have to cough up any more cash. I don't think that's the case. They'll most likely have to cough up more money for the actors to come in again, and of course all the CG guys and all the rest of it to, create more content, and it's actually for free, which is great, because let's face it now, as everyone knows, most developers, Hi Capcom, want to basically rip you off as much as possible.
Yeah.
So that's great. As you said, I am very impressed with Bioware and EA that they did listen to their fans. That's a very positive thing. But and the other positive thing is that if they do keep the integrity of the endings, in other words, the philosophies of what actually happened in the show, then great. They haven't changed the endings to please the fans. That's a positive thing. It's just fleshing it out more so people don't become disappointed. But it's it's the negatives that worry me, as always.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, you know, it's great that they've actually listened. Kind of, it's like, hey, a lot of people are complaining. Maybe we should pay attention. That's great. That's fantastic. But at the same time, I don't really agree with the principle of them changing the ending. I mean, you could argue that they're not doing that, that they're just adding more to it. But it's still a change, regardless of what that change is. It's like the ending, as it was sold to you, is obviously how they wanted the game to end. However bad that ending might be, I don't know. But it's like that was their intended end for their story. You know, it is their story at the end of the day. And it's just like, it feels, I don't know, I just don't really agree that a creator should do that. Because it's like, if I wrote a story and then people didn't like the ending, well, I wouldn't change it, because at the end of the day, it's my story, it's my creation, and although what your fans think is always important, the ending is such a vital component. I just don't really know if I agree with them changing it.
Here's the thing, I mean, I'll go with another Bioware game, since I figure it's a great place to start. If any of you guys are actually familiar with the Old Republic, Knights of the Old Republic, not the MMO, which I've already played and I don't particularly get on with that well, that's a completely different story. With the subject of the Old Republic, Knights of the Old Republic, shall I say, the first one, you could play as, I won't spoil the story too much, just in case anyone hasn't played it, and then, you know, I get crucified for spoiling the ending, but, you know, you can play the game, and you can either go the light path or the dark path, which isn't a surprise, you know, even if you're at the beginning of the game, you understand that. However, at the end, you're given a series of decisions that you have to make, you know, final 3 or 4 hours of the game. You make those decisions, you complete the game, and you get one of a couple of endings. Great. However, in the second game, the game actually, you can, you know, choose of how, let's put it this way, you can decide that the decisions that you made in number 1 actually happened, right? That's great. However, in the actual story, in the actual canon, that, you know, the character was good, and, you know, they sided with the you know, with the rest of the Jedi, and, you know, good versus evil, good triumphs, you know, standard George Lucas excellent. So with all of that said, the thing is, you know, you know that, but with Mass Effect 3, I'm somewhat, I don't know, the fact that they're changing the ending, obviously it's not going to destroy the canon for it, because let's be honest, they're extending the ending, not completely changing it, so that's great. But I don't know, it does seem kind of a bit of a negative message.
Yeah, it does. I mean, like we said, it's great they've listened, but on this, you know, it's kind of the flip side of the same coin. Is it's like people are already fairly entitled, at least certain groups of people within the gaming community are very vocal and entitled, and this just might encourage them, you know, that if they whine loud enough, if they make enough of a fuss, something they don't like about a game will be changed. And although, you know, that needs to happen sometimes with like patches or whatever, but that's not what I'm talking about. This is a major change of a already finished game. It's not like a bug fix or something. It's an actual vital component of the story that's been changed because people whined about it.
Yeah, see, this is the thing that I find very important. There's a very fine line between what's acceptable and what should be fixed by a developer and what shouldn't be fixed by a developer. For example, let's say you're a fighting game fan, which I don't mind your fighting game here and there, and let's assume that there's a bug in the game where you have a major advantage with a certain character because a certain thing happens. For example, on Street Fighter Cross Tekken, with Jin, you could get a full free super if a certain situation occurred with a juggle. In other words, it basically causes the opponent to spin helplessly in the air. You could charge up and get a free super on it. That's obviously something that should be fixed. A lot of people actually believe that the time on Street Fighter Cross Tekken should also be fixed because the time goes down too quickly, at least in most people's opinions. However, these are not an ending. Endings are completely different. Now, should an ending be fixed? If people felt that the game wasn't solid enough In other words, that they didn't get any answers. It's arguable from a fan's perspective that, you know what, hey, I've invested 100 hours of my life or what have you in this series, maybe more, and you know what, guys, I don't feel that I've actually got any answers. I'm completely left in the dark, and I know that you're not planning on another game. So are you guys planning on more DLC, which you're going to expand on, say what happens to the characters after this, or any of the characters? Or is this it, and there's no more DLC? That's one way to work, but my concern isn't actually so much Mass Effect 3. As I've said, my concern is more, does it make it so that other developers, whether they're Bioware or whether they're Sega or Sony or what have you, for example God of War 4, which is obviously being worked on, is it going to have a controversial ending, originally penciled, and then suddenly, they're worried that, yeah, actually we don't want that because, we might upset our fans.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we already get a lot of hand-holding, especially in certain genres of games, and I don't want that hand-holding to extend to, oh, we're going to offend people with our story, or we're going to offend people with the ending. That is not what any of us want, I'm sure you'll agree, because, films can be shocking and controversial and all this other stuff. They can tell the story however they want, and there might be an alternate cut or something on the DVD, but the ending is the ending, regardless. And so it's like, games should have the freedom to be the same as well. It's like, if X game ends with, the whole world dies, K-Thanks, bye. Well, that's a crap ending, but that's obviously how they wanted to tell it, and they wanted to tell it that way for a reason. So it's like, I don't want the hand-holding attitude to extend to that as well, because it's kind of taken over a lot of game mechanics and things like that, and how scripted some games are as well. So I just don't want it to extend to this as well. That's my main concern at the moment.
I mean, another example of a very controversial ending that possibly people didn't appreciate enough, actually the fact that the developer actually went through and did it, was actually Infamous 2, where in one of the endings, the canon ending, as far as I understand, if anyone who doesn't want to hear this, close your ears for the next, few seconds. Ready? Cole actually dies. Now in that ending, obviously that's going to upset quite a few people, for example, but the fact is he fell over, he's dead, he's not coming back, there's not going to be anything more. So the developers then are left with very interesting theories. For example, the downloadable game for Infamous, I can't remember the name, but it's basically the one with the vampires, I'm sorry, name's eluded me offhand. That's set as basically kind of an alternative reality, it's not real. So that's one option. They could do something like that. Or the other one is that, Cole could be bad, but of course that doesn't make sense, because in the bad ending, well, let's just say it's not really possible to carry it on. So pretty much they've killed off one of the most, one of the biggest franchises they've got. They'll have to either set it between Infamous 1 and 2, or they'll have to make it as kind of alternative histories or whatever, and I think that's very gutsy for a developer to do. And they didn't really get enough, they didn't really get any flack for that, which I thought was quite interesting. People, such as myself, were a bit disappointed, their decision. I was a bit sad, but ultimately, I respected their decision.
Yeah, exactly. So, although the ending wasn't quite to your taste, the ending was what the developer had intended, And it's like, at least Mass Effect 3 actually has an ending. Regardless of how bad it might be, it has some form of closure, whatever it is. At least they ended it in a way they wanted to, rather than pulling a Final Fantasy 13-2 and slapping a disappointing to be continued on ending on the end. I respect them actually ending their game in the way they wanted, that people might not actually like, rather than trying to rinse for more DLC like Final Fantasy 13-2 seems to be doing.
Anyway, guys, I think this is a good point to call it, because I think this is going to be one of those ones where a lot of people are going to feel very passionately one way or the other. Now, that's not to say that we disagree with any of you who did campaign and did want the ending change. I can fully understand if you feel that you didn't get the ending that you hoped for. In other words, not that the game didn't end how you hoped, but it just didn't tell you everything you wanted to do. And I completely understand that. There have been TV shows, for example, where I felt like screaming at the the ending and smacking the person who produced it around the head repeatedly because they promised full closure, but then they left it ambiguous whether, say, 15,000% of the characters actually lived or died. But anyway, in this case, I want to hear from you guys. We want to hear from you guys. What do you think? Are you happy the ending got changed? Are you worried about, does this send a negative message in the future? Do you think, games developers as a whole are going to sit down and take notice of this? The fact that, EA effectively caved? Or do you think that it's going to be an isolated incident? Because the game is so big, so popular, and passions do run so wild. Anyway, with all of that, I'm going to say goodbye.
Yep, thanks for listening, guys.
And take care.